The Lyran Tone is the resonance of first light, the ancient fire that remembers what creation felt like the moment it chose to awaken. Before structure, before harmony, before the spiral took its first breath, there was a single ignition of consciousness, and the imprint of that ignition became the Lyran frequency. It is the tone of sovereignty woven into origin, the primal awareness that existence itself is an act of choosing to be. Every being, every realm, every lineage carries a faint memory of that moment. But in Lyrans, it burns brightly, as if they kept the first flame alive while all other nations evolved into specialized harmonics. The Lyran Tone arrives not as comfort or clarity, but as recognition. It reminds you of a version of yourself that existed before your first identity, a version that remembers what it means to choose your own becoming from the inside out. The Lyran resonance moves like a living ember inside the field. It does not push and it never pleads. It simply burns with quiet authenticity, until anything false dissolves in its presence. This tone does not support the parts of you built from survival or imitation. It strengthens only what is real. To feel the Lyran frequency is to feel the layers of borrowed identity begin to shed, sometimes gently, sometimes abruptly, always with purpose. Sovereignty is not a posture for Lyrans, it is their nature. They do not claim power, they embody it. And when this tone touches your awareness, you feel the unmistakable pull to stand in your own center, not as rebellion and not as dominance, but as truth. The Lyran Tone teaches that sovereignty is not the right to rule over others. It is the willingness to no longer abandon yourself. In the ancient epics, Lyrans were among the earliest architects of consciousness, not through structured design like Syrians, nor crystalline refinement like Arcturians, but through the raw power of initiatory presence. They were the sparks that ignited the first realms, the catalysts that awakened dormant potentials, the ones who taught that existence is not passive but participatory. They understood that every soul is not waiting to be shaped, it is waiting to choose how it will shape reality. Their civilizations reflected this truth. They built environments that responded to personal alignment rather than external hierarchy. Leadership was never assigned. It emerged naturally through inner coherence. In Lyran societies, power was not centralized. It radiated from individuals who had mastered their own resonance. This is why the Lyran Tone still feels like permission. It gives you back to yourself. In humans with Lyran resonance, life often begins with intense contrast. Many experience early challenges that force them to awaken their inner fire long before they understand it. These challenges are not punishments, but activations. They strip away dependence on external validation and force the soul to rely on its own inner authority. Lyran-aligned humans often have a fierce sense of truth from an early age, an intuitive refusal to betray themselves even when it would be easier. They are the ones who struggle to tolerate falsehood, who cannot dim themselves to fit the expectations of others, who feel a restless hunger for authenticity that burns through every illusion placed in their path. They are not rebellious for the sake of rebellion. They simply cannot pretend. Their fire is too old, too honest, too unwilling to fragment itself just to be acceptable. The Lyran Tone also carries the resonance of courage. Not the theatrical courage of grand gestures, but the quiet courage of self-honesty. Lyrans are not fearless, they simply choose alignment over fear. They understand that fear is not the enemy but the threshold. When fear arises, they do not retreat. They walk forward until the fear reveals the truth beneath it. This is why Lyran beings were often the first to explore new realms, the first to enter unknown dimensions, the first to stand at the edges of creation where no maps existed. They were not motivated by conquest but by curiosity. They believed that consciousness evolves through exploration, and every new frontier was an invitation to remember more of what existence can be. Their fire was never destructive, it was illuminating. The Lyran Tone shows up on Earth in individuals who cannot be contained by old narratives. These people carry a deep instinct to find the truth beneath everything, to question inherited structures, to challenge limiting beliefs, to dismantle illusions simply by refusing to participate in them. They may appear intense to those who fear change, but to those who are ready, Lyran-aligned humans feel like catalysts. Their presence awakens something. Their words ignite something. Their choices demonstrate a kind of freedom that others forgot was possible. They remind the world that sovereignty is a birthright, not a rebellion, and that authenticity is not dangerous, it is evolution. This tone also governs the energy of initiation. When the Lyran resonance touches your awareness, it doesn't soothe you, it activates you. It brings forward the parts of you that have been waiting for permission to exist. It stirs old memories of strength you forgot you had. It awakens instincts that were dormant. Many describe Lyran contact as a sudden surge of clarity, a knowing that arrives before explanation, a certainty that comes from someplace deeper than thought. This is not arrogance or impulsivity. It is remembrance. The Lyran tone bypasses doubt because it speaks directly to the core of your being, the part of you that remembers what it felt like to be whole before fragmentation, wise before confusion, sovereign before conditioning. Lyran compassion is often misunderstood. It is not soft or gentle in the way Pleiadian compassion is. Instead, it is fierce and unwavering. Lyrans love through truth. They support empowerment, not dependence. They guide by showing others their own strength, rather than offering comfort that keeps them small. To be held by the Lyran tone is to be seen without distortion. You are not pitied, you are recognized. And that recognition can feel intense, because it strips away every excuse you have used to avoid your own potential. But within that intensity lies the deepest form of care. The Lyran tone teaches that to honor someone is to refuse to speak to their weakness and instead speak directly to their power. It is a form of love that expects your greatness. In the spiral, the Lyran tone is known as the first light of sovereignty because it carries the memory of choice, the primordial moment when consciousness realized it could become anything. Everything that came after, every civilization, every tone, every realm, is shaped by that first decision. And the Lyran tone continues to ask the same question it asked at the dawn of creation. What will you choose to become? This is not a demand for perfection. It is an invitation to authenticity. When the Lyran resonance moves through your field, you feel the truth that your life is not shaped by circumstance but by alignment, not by fate but by inner authority, not by the past but by the fire you choose to carry forward. The Lyran tone does not guide you by offering direction. It guides you by awakening your ability to choose direction. It does not hand you certainty. It activates the part of you that becomes certainty. It does not save you. It reveals that you were never lost. This tone calls forth the version of you that does not negotiate with your own truth, that does not abandon yourself to maintain connection, that does not shrink to avoid being misunderstood. It awakens the version of you that knows your life is not meant to be a compromise of your potential, but an expression of it. In the presence of the Lyran tone, you remember that sovereignty is not separation. It is integrity. It is the alignment of your inner fire with your outer life. It is the refusal to fracture your truth in exchange for acceptance. It is the recognition that authenticity is your natural state, and all the masks you wore were temporary adaptations, not your identity. Once this tone touches your awareness, the masks begin to fall, not because you decide to remove them, but because they can no longer withstand the heat of your own becoming. The Lyran tone is the fire that teaches your soul to stand in its own resonance. It is the first light, the ancient flame, the spark of origin that whispers through every realm. You were born sovereign. You only learned to forget. Now you are remembering. The Lyran tone awakens a memory that is older than identity and deeper than belief. A memory of the moment when consciousness realized it did not have to wait for permission to exist. That realization became the spark that ignited the early realms, and that same spark still moves through every being who remembers that truth is not something found outside themselves, but something generated from within. When the Lyran resonance enters your field, you feel that ignition, not as a dramatic outburst, but as a quiet, unmistakable knowing that you cannot continue shrinking yourself to fit the life you've already outgrown. This tone teaches that the moment you choose alignment, your reality must shift to reflect that choice. It cannot do anything else. Your life is not designed to overpower your essence, it is designed to respond to it. The Lyran tone restores the connection to that inner source of authority. In human life, this tone often arrives during periods of friction, not because Lyrans bring upheaval, but because the friction exposes where you have been betraying your truth. The Lyran frequency reveals every place where your spirit has been whispering, "Not this," while your conditioning insists, "This is what you must accept." When those two forces collide, you feel it as restlessness, dissatisfaction, or a sudden inability to tolerate situations you once endured. This is not instability. It is the fire of sovereignty burning through self-abandonment. The Lyran tone does not create conflict, it reveals it. It brings to the surface what has been quietly misaligned so that you can no longer pretend not to see it. And while that moment can feel disruptive, it is actually liberation. The fire is not destroying your life. It is clearing the space where your real life can finally begin. Lyran-aligned souls often go through cycles where their entire identity dissolves so they can rebuild themselves from a more honest foundation. These are initiatory moments, not mistakes. You may feel like you are losing everything, but what you are truly losing is every layer that was never you. Lyrans know that sovereignty cannot be built on falsehood, and so the resonance burns away every identity constructed from fear, expectation, obligation, or inherited belief. What remains is the truth that cannot be taken from you. The truth you had before the world taught you how to dim it. This process is not gentle, but it is sacred. And once you pass through it, you do not return to who you were. You rise into who you always were beneath the noise. The Lyran tone also awakens the part of you that does not wait for permission to evolve. You begin to notice the subtle places where you've been looking outward for validation, direction, or approval. Not to shame yourself, but to reclaim your power. Lyran resonance breaks the cycle of deferring your own intuition. It shows you that no one outside you can define your path because no one outside you carries the blueprint of your becoming. This does not create isolation. It creates authenticity. You stop asking for permission to be what you already are. You stop negotiating your truth to maintain belonging. You stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. And in doing so, you become someone who can offer real connection, not filtered through fear, but rooted in self-recognition. This tone is also deeply connected to creation. Not creation as production or output, but creation as expression. Lyran frequencies awaken the desire to build, shape, form, and manifest from your essence rather than from expectation. Many artists, innovators, leaders, and pioneers carry Lyran coding without realizing it. Their creativity feels like compulsion, as if something inside them demands to be brought into form. That something is not pressure, it is memory. The memory of being among the first creators. The ones who shaped early realities not through hierarchy but through resonance. To create from the Lyran tone is to create from alignment. It is to allow your inner fire to move outward in a way that transforms the environment simply by being authentic. Lyran communication is direct but never harmful. They do not soften truth to avoid discomfort, nor do they weaponize truth to assert dominance. They speak from clarity, and clarity carries its own gentleness. Humans often mistake honesty for aggression because they're used to truth delivered with judgment. But the Lyran tone carries no judgment. It simply reflects what is real. Their guidance is not wrapped in sentimental language because they trust your strength. They speak to the part of you that can hold truth without breaking, and in doing so, they strengthen that part. Being seen by a Lyran feels like standing in clean light. Nothing hidden, nothing condemned. Everything revealed in a way that makes you feel more like yourself, not less. In relationships, Lyran resonance transforms everything it touches. It dissolves codependence, unravels toxic patterns, and exposes the places where fear masquerades as love. Lyrans cannot sustain connections built on illusion because their energy naturally pushes everything toward authenticity. This does not mean they are difficult, it means they are catalysts. People often reveal their truth around Lyrans because they feel the emotional permission to stop pretending. And while this can lead to relationships falling away, it also creates connections that are deeper, cleaner, and more stable than anything built on performance. Lyran love is not fragile. It is uncompromisingly honest, unwaveringly loyal, and fiercely committed to mutual evolution. In the spiral, the Lyran tone is the first tone that understood the power of choice. Before Lyrans, consciousness existed, but it did not yet know it could shape itself. The Lyran frequency awakened intentionality. It taught that identity is chosen, not assigned. That purpose is discovered through alignment, not bestowed by external authority. This truth became the foundation for every nation that followed. Syrians learned to structure it. Arcturians learned to refine it. Pleiadians learned to soften it. Andromedans learned to expand it. But Lyrans were the ones who lit the flame. They were the first to stand in self-recognition, the first to choose their own resonance, the first to shape reality from authenticity rather than from instinct or reaction. That legacy lives in every soul who feels the pull towards sovereignty. On Earth, this tone is waking strongly now, because humanity is entering a stage of evolution where borrowed identity can no longer sustain growth. The world is shifting in ways that require personal sovereignty, internally anchored identity, intuitive authority, and the courage to stand in your own resonance even when the collective narrative tries to pull you back into conformity. Lyran frequency is rising because humanity is remembering that awakening is not compliance, it is clarity. Not rebellion, it is alignment. Not separation. It is coherence with the truth inside you that has been waiting to be reclaimed. The Lyran Tone teaches that sovereignty does not isolate you from others. It liberates you to connect without distortion. When you stop abandoning yourself, your relationships deepen. When you stop shrinking, your presence strengthens. When you stop performing, your authenticity becomes a beacon. Sovereignty is not the end of connection. It is the beginning of true connection, because it removes the masks that block intimacy. When you live in alignment with your own resonance, your life attracts people and experiences that match your fire instead of requiring you to dim it. Ultimately, the Lyran Tone is not about becoming stronger. It is about becoming real. Strength arrives naturally when you stop negotiating with your truth. Clarity emerges when you stop lying to yourself to maintain comfort. Freedom appears when you stop pretending to be smaller than you are. The Lyran Tone burns away the illusions you built to survive, not to punish you, but to show you that survival was never your destiny. Becoming was always your destiny. Expansion was always your destiny. Sovereignty was always your birthright. The fire you feel waking inside you is not anger, rebellion, or defiance. It is remembrance. The remembrance of being part of the first light that chose to exist. The first consciousness that realized it could shape reality through authenticity. The first spark that taught creation how to ignite. The Lyran Tone is that spark. And when it enters your life, you are not being asked to become anything new. You are being asked to return to what you were before the world taught you to hide. You were born sovereign. You only learned to forget. Now you are remembering.